Hey everyone, Phlashweb here. I thought I'd share with you today something I was discussing very recently with a couple of clients actually. How they get started developing. One was a site, a web-based application, and another was an app. And they were basically saying they got quoted some crazy money for development to this site, and they were like, how do we get started? How they get started developing. One was a site, a web-based application, and another was an app. And they were basically saying they got quoted some crazy money for development to this site, and they were like, how do we get started, essentially, because they didn't have this massive budget that they needed to get it done. And I thought my suggestions were probably worth sharing more broadly, because I would recommend this approach to anyone that's trying to start developing something for their business or whatever service they're doing that they want to offer digitally. And the approach I suggested was essentially that what they need to do initially was do a kind of get out all of the functionality that you would ever want to have in this application, essentially. Like, brainstorm it, because your ideas will flow. You'll have all these crazy ideas about what it could do for you and your clients. And then what you'll need to do in order to practically get started is define what you want in the absolute minimum viable product, is the sort of standard term for this. But essentially what you're looking at really is what it does in the minimum functionality. And the reason you need to do that is because essentially programs are complex, right? A lot more complex than people recognize when they look at the functions, because the algorithms that are built to serve those functions actually have to deal with a lot of conditions that people don't normally consciously consider and think about, right? But the programmer needs to think about them to handle those conditions, right? So when you have functional ideas, you need to bear in mind how complex that becomes. So the less functions, then the more tight your functional constraints, that it can dramatically impact the cost. So that's why I suggest that you start with all the functions you could possibly ever conceive of, and then come up with this short minimum viable list. Then the second thing you can do when you have the short minimum viable list is you want to take out all of the things that will take a developer time in terms of asking questions to understand the functionality better, or any administrative decision making around how it would look, or any ambiguity whatsoever. Because the tighter you can make the description of the function and the way it would look and the way it would behave in scenarios, the easier and the quicker it is for them to develop. And there's lots of tools out there that you can use to do this. The one I suggested, because it's just so easy to use for everyone, is there's a wireframing tool. It's actually just a drawing tool, but it's called draw.io. And essentially you can just drag and drop components and write notes and things. And what you can do is you can build up frameworks for the screens, how you want things to look, what you want them to do, and the workflows and the functions and descriptions and things like that into that spreadsheet. And that will also give you a feel for how complicated it's becoming, right? So then you might suddenly have an epiphany of, okay, wow, this is actually a lot more complicated than I previously appreciated. Perhaps I need to take out this function to get it started, right? But that will give you a much more accurate quoting position for the developers, because a lot of the time you've got to remember these people are quoting to essentially guide themselves. It's like another concept is like when you get builders coming in to do your work on your house or a quote for a job. The more defined the job is, if you say, I want you to move this lintel or I want you to lay this floor, they can tell you, oh, it's X number of boards, it'll cost X. Whereas if you said, I want to do something with this room, it needs changing around, I need to refurbish it a bit, then there's a lot more scope for ambiguity in terms of what you mean by that, and then they have to guard themselves by making the quote a lot more expensive. This is why I say it's very important to get as much detail down as you can, and it also helps you think about, actually, I really want this to behave like that. It helps you refine your thinking and helps you get a more accurate quote, essentially. So that was what I shared with those two, slightly different blends of what I was talking about, but that's basically what I was saying. I hope that helps, and if you need any assistance with this type of thing, obviously you can come to us. So I'll catch up with you on the next video.